Good morning from Zürich. You're listening to Monocle on Sunday with me, Tyler Brûlé. Coming up on today's program today, we've got Gabe Bullard. He's made the journey, of course, from Basel. Also, Priska Amstutz. Finally, she's back. We're going to find out where she's been. But Gabe, maybe we'll start with you. What's caught your eye this week? Very sort of slow week, I would say, in politics.
Oh, very calm. We've got the extreme confidence from Republicans and a lot of indecision and hand-wringing from Democrats in the U.S. So there's a lot to unpack there.
And maybe we'll talk a little bit about this sort of issue of Eurovision, where it's going to be. It's certainly not going to be in Zurich, is it?
That is the big decision that has to be made now.
Okay, we'll talk about that. We'll also get the latest updates from Bangkok.
This is James Chambers, Monocle's Asia editor, and I'll be joining the show a little later on from Bangkok to talk about a less than golden reaction to Thailand's Olympic outfits and the rise of a cute and cuddly cookie shop mascot.
Lots to discuss in the world of Olympic uniforms this week. Also, Monocle's design editor gives us his view from London, and the co-founder of the bookshop and cafe, Hani Behlacene, is going to be joining us from Paris. It's the 21st of July, 2024, live from Zurich. This is Monocle on Sunday.
Live from Zurich, this is Monocle on Sunday with Tyler Brûlé.
And good morning from Zurich. It's a little bit damp. It's a bit humid. It was a wonderful summer's day here yesterday, but it's Sunday. It's a little bit grey. We will see what happens. I'm very happy to say that we have Gabe Bullard here. Also, Priska Amstutz, who's not been around this microphone for ages. Priska, where have you been?
I have been traveling a bit. I have been developing some media projects. Everything is still very secret. And I've been to the body the first time this week. So
the first time this week, but not the first time of the season.
First time of the season.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, so listeners, this is a major thing because, of course, people should have of course been in the lake for a very long time. It sounds like we're running a kennel here as well today. That's a dog in the background, but we'll fix him in a moment. But this is sort of, it's major that it's a July period, and someone who's someone who loves, of course, going to the bathing club. I know as much as you do. It's something that we're almost in August and you haven't been yet.
Yes, it's crazy. I've been a bit sick, so I didn't go into the water because it was very cool. But now this week and the
lake is warm now. I mean, it's really warm, properly sort of warmed
nice. Up. I was on Thursday and Friday. And I made the most of it, spent hours in the sun. It was very nice. And I read a story about, I didn't know that it's legal to bathe topless in Zurich bodies, indoor and outdoor. Outdoor, I have known that,
yes.
But I didn't know that it was also legal indoor. And the city council has confirmed this because apparently some politicians were worried that it's not being enhanced the same way indoors as outdoors, but the city council said
interesting that
they're
busying themselves, wondering why this hasn't been enhanced. Gabe, I'm not sure if you know what the topless policies are in Basel, but anyway, Gabe, and you're sort of a newer voice, as I said. Obviously, Priska has been with us for many years. This is your third turn, I think. Second turn here. But of course, American, but Basel-based journalist. Just tell us again. I mean, you're just down the street from us here in Zurich. Of course, you have the very different bathing culture in Basel. It's all about the river. It's about jumping in the Rhine, and sort of the ability, of course, to put your clothing in a waterproof bag and then drift down the Rhine and sort of get out at the other end and then go for your drink in the evening.
Exactly. Yes, I was at a cafe on the banks of the Rhine yesterday, watching as I think it was also a lot of people's first time in the Rhine this season because it has been so cold, so wet that the Rhine has been too high. It's been moving too fast. It was moving quickly, but so many people floating with those fish-shaped bags, the wicklefish. They were just going down, seemed to be having a blast. If there is an anti-topless policy or anti-nudity policy, it was not being enforced in certain corners of the Rhine, as I noticed around Basel, but it was really quite a summertime scene for I think everyone. It's just been so pent up for so long. People couldn't wait to get out.
Well, I want to bring someone else in who loves the summertime scene. Our Nic Monisse, our design editor, is with us in London this morning. Nic, good morning.
Good morning.
Listen, the last time I saw you was in Milan earlier in the week. You've returned to London, but what's happened in between, Nic?
Oh, sorry, I'm just caught up on the topless thing because can we go back to that? I can give you.
Well, I don't think we need to disclose because listeners, you've probably heard this a few times. If there's anyone when it comes to sort of having a company event and there's a dance floor involved, Nic is always the first one. he has this sort of one-handed move where he can take his T-shirt and turn it into a tank top, or maybe I say more of a boob tube, actually.
Boob tube is what we
more
go
is
for.
boob tube, and then the shirt is off. So you're all for a topless dance floor.
Do we have a policy on that? I'm still a little bit confused because I'm
You've got a job, so clearly we don't have a policy, or we do. I don't know. Maybe we encourage it. Hard to say.
I think it's a reaction against the prudish Australia, because on Australian beaches you will never see anyone topless. So I think there's and I don't know if that's like because everyone's scared of skin cancer or whatever, but because every time I go home, someone in my family inevitably has had half their ear chewed off by the lasers as they come to terms with the fact that they sunbathed very heavily in the 1960s and 1970s. So I don't know if we're reacting to that or we're just quite simply prudes, and that's why I've had to leave the country.
Well, we had a bit of a conversation about this, didn't we, in Milan, which is this, and maybe we actually will talk a little bit about today about, the Anglo-Saxon world, the English language world, and it was actually going back to Australia, Nick.
Yeah.
My column today, where we talk about sort of, hysterical headlines that we've seen off the back, of course, of this big tech meltdown, etc., has already sort of generated a lot of emails. And I got a note from one of your countrymen who was really, talking about this sort of great divide between the English-speaking world and the rest of the world. And I think we were talking about this, earlier in the week in Milan, in a lovely courtyard at the Four Seasons, lovely cocktail party, and just saying that how many rules there are in Australia. It's like it feels like sort of like the fun police would probably be the biggest branch of law enforcement in Australia,
and very well funded. I think it's almost like for whatever reason, particularly in Anglo culture, certainly in Australia, where it's almost like you're not trusted to know how to behave in any certain situation. I think part of the reason we were discussing this as well is the weather's amazing, and granted in the UK you can have a drink in the park, but we were talking about the fact that if you were in Australia and the weather turns it on, which it does so often all the time, you can't take a bottle of sparkling down to Sydney Harbour and have a drink on the harbour, because what happens if you have 2 or 3 glasses too many and get drunk? I don't know, but we don't want to let that even happen. So it is quite fascinating, these sorts of shifts. And as you said in your column this morning, you're talking about the hysteria, and people over dramatizing things like airlines shutting down and missing flights, hey ho, but it's for whatever reason the way we use our words in Anglo cultures and the way we over dramatize things and over panic things is certainly something that perhaps we can unpack.
Well, and this is something, Priska, I'm not sure what projects you're working on journalistically, but we were saying, I don't know if we see as much of it even in the tabloid press. I mean, maybe things are graphically laid out in a hysterical way if I look at maybe Blick or Bildzeitung. But this overuse of the word sort of horror, terror, all of these things, which are often there just to explain the most mundane thing happening in daily life. And this, I think this whole thing on Friday, yes, I mean, having a global sort of technical meltdown, was less than ideal, and people are probably all over the world are still trying to get where they need to go. But, to use the words death, blue death screens and all of this language, I wonder if do you see this sort of problematic journalistically? I mean, one side, are we just becoming, I'm not saying maybe we, the English language media, are just becoming lazy, but we also know it's part of the world of clickbait, the endless scroll. So if I've got another outrageous headline, something which seems completely dire, well, you're going to stick with my newspaper a little bit longer.
Yes, but I feel very much the same. We don't have any means of exaggeration anymore, or like really putting on point if something is really dramatic or really tragic.
Because where do you go after this,
yes.
right?
So that's all these superlatives. It's very, I don't like it at all. I think we should always dial back a bit when writing headlines, because it's also not informative at all. It's confusing, and I always think clickbait, if you click it and then see there's something else happening, that's very bad.
I think you see so many outlets going for, even beyond clickbait, just the most sensational headline possible, because that's all they think people are going to look at. That they're going to click through, they're going to see maybe 2 lines because their website is terribly designed. They're going to see 2 lines, ads, jump out. okay, there's been an ad impression. The only takeaway anybody gets is this absolutely extreme headline, and it's such a sort of presentist idea of everything has to be the most important life or death thing happening absolutely this second, and no idea of, well, what's coming next? What else are you going to look at on the page? You're just going to be there, get that ad impression, and get out of there.
And I think it's confusing because it's not important for important KPIs, which is duration on the page, scrolling down, seeing all the ads or all the sponsors, and get the full content, because you're off when you've read a too extreme headline and then you're not fulfilled with the story that comes afterward.
Nic, it's just as Gabe used the word design, and it's a fascinating when we think about sort of the current state of digital design, because sort of spin the globe and look at any number of newspapers, and they sort of fall into maybe two, maybe sort of three design patterns. You'd say sort of the home of a lot of this hysterical headlines would be, Daily Mail Online. I mean, it has to be one of the ugliest, news websites in the world. It's impenetrable. It's the spacing, everything. But yet, part of it, of course, is having these types of headers written throughout. It's sort of fascinating that we haven't really moved on, have we, when it comes to newspaper and magazine design. Or if you do, and if you have sort of gone beyond and you've done something which is maybe a little bit more avant-garde, it often sort of moves into the territory of just being completely unusable as well. So I'm wondering whether we've sort of found this level place, that, whether I look at, the NZZ here in Switzerland, whether I look at the Times in London, is that the new language? Is that, we're sort of in a place that this actually is what print is. And in the same way, newspaper design hasn't really changed fundamentally on paper for a very long time. Are we in that same place? Nic, over to you.
What, being stuck in, I guess, these digital designs? Cause I'm actually...
if you're on sort of, if you're, let's say, looking at something on a laptop, then you're sort of in a world of probably 3 columns across, four columns.
I'm pulling up and I'm comparing contrast the Daily Mail and the Times. And you can immediately see they're talking to very different audiences just by, I guess, you kind of get on the Daily Mail website and you're just hit with a barrage of ads and absolute chaos. But I think actually what's kind of strange is the reading experience is quite kind of similar. They really both push you to continue scrolling. You've got to then click and want to read more. It's all about, and it's already been mentioned here, but it's all about, I guess, trying to keep people on your website or on your page, which obviously we know is the right thing, but we understand why you would want to do that as a publication. But then ultimately it becomes, this is maybe where we get into that chaos, because in trying to keep us on the page, you've got to continue to have this sense of drama. So you've got to continue to push through, you've got to continue to click through, you've got to continue to click down, and all of that actually detracts from the story. It's like, it no longer becomes about, what's the important message we're trying to get off, but instead, how can we keep people here on our page?
So, Priska, here's one for you. Do you think that going to a news website has to make people sort of sit up, grab their attention, but should it be sort of instilling anxiety when you go there, the anxiety of maybe there's going to be sort of a major story down page? Is that part of the draw, or should we be in the other direction? It should be a policy of a newsroom not to create anxiety for its readers or listeners or viewers, whatever the news outlet happens to be.
I think it should be the second, not to create anxiety, because this will lead to news avoidance. I think everyone can just get so much and then they're off. And I think what happened in the last 2 or 3 years, there's so many topics inducing anxiety. They induce anxiety anyway. And if we use language to make that more extreme and not to present solutions and maybe a sense of calmness, then the numbers of news avoiders will grow, and I think that's very. There's just been so much of late. Maybe we're at the half-year point where I think a lot of major news organizations are also just looking at the traffic, and I think a lot of certainly think tanks as well analyzing the data. And news avoidance is a huge issue. And so and again, we come off the back of a week where everyone's talking. Well, not everyone, but at least one person in particular talking about being the upholder of democracy.
but it's very difficult to have a democratic process if you don't have, of course, an informed electorate and also responsible media, Gabe.
Yes, I've been doing some reporting and talking to a lot of these independent news outlets that have been starting up, especially across the U.S., in what is, I think, a really interesting time where a lot of the larger publishers and smaller publishers have seen their social media traffic absolutely crater as people are abandoning some of these platforms as the algorithms change. Search traffic is always sort of in danger based on, whatever Google may try to do with the results it's feeding. So these outlets are working on trying to have a smarter design and trying to have a more subscription-based service. There's the Baltimore Banner, this independent publication. It's only a few years old now, has 44,000 paid subscribers for what it's doing. There's a division within WordPress called Newspack that's doing some very interesting work in trying to give sites a better content management system and a better sense of design, so they're not having the same sort of site that's just overloaded with ads, doesn't load properly on each device, takes forever to load, its stories are incomprehensibly displayed, that sort of thing. So I think a lot of these publishers are really working toward that idea of getting people who are going to be paying a little bit of money, returning to see the news, and hopefully calming down a bit and not necessarily going for those most sensational headlines, but saying, here's a trusted voice, their site is clean, I'm giving them a few dollars, they have maybe a great newsletter, something like that. So I think we're starting to see that bubble up from the absolute smallest newsrooms, but then on the larger sense, that's just a big concern with some of these major publishers and the way that they're treating their readers and just scrambling to get people as social media traffic collapses.
Okay, I want to just do a very small poll. It's just going to be a poll of two, Priska and you, Nic. Priska, to start, do you spend much time? Are you subscribing to any of these independent sites that are out there? So, on one side in Switzerland, we've seen the rise of Watson and other news agencies, which have been sort of slightly alternative and certainly going for a younger audience. And then of course we've, I would say probably one of the originals would be Republic here in Switzerland. Yes. In terms of your support and also, I guess sort of the trust as well that you have in these types of organizations, important and have they become important enough or substantial enough challengers to the bigger players?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I subscribe to Republic, also some English-speaking or English-written independent news outlets. I think they're very important. I also think they do a good job, but it's very hard. It's incredible. They struggle so much. And Switzerland is such a tough market. It's really, it's to despair because Entität is doing well also in Germany, but Republik, it's such a tiny market, and you have to have all these specialists also. You have to have a podcast team, social media team,
video team, etc. Yeah,
it's you almost can't be a small publisher or a small independent news outlet without having a big staff. It used to be. You could start as 2 or 3 journalists and just go along with it. So it's so they don't have the impact they should have. That's systemically, and of course we should all support them. Or maybe also political system or political support could be a bit better.
Nic, are you subscribing to independent outlets, not just reading them, but actually deploying a few Aussie dollars or pounds every month?
Mine is still...
And not expensing it.
Not expensing it. That's sort of the key thing. Well, if that's the case, then nothing. For me, it's all about... A big thing for me is the Architect's newspaper, which is a US website that I basically check in with every day. And the reason I always turn to this is everything is obviously, framed through the industry of architecture and design, but it kind of strips out some of that sensationalism that we were talking about earlier. You'll get, reporting on Biden and Trump, but it's through the lens of the built environment. And maybe that sounds a little bit strange, but it certainly helps, I guess, to, at a time when everyone's trying to go for something clickbaity, everyone's trying to be, perhaps over dramatizing things. I mean, we have your headlines from earlier, horror scenes at airports. I mean, you'd think that there was some sort of horrific attack when ultimately it's just a blue screen coming on. When everything's framed, I guess, through this different lens of not trying to get you to, continue to click through, I find it a lot easier to digest and you're able to have a lot more of a sensible conversation. So that's one I always turn to. And then it's, I guess it's balancing those big dailies with something like the Saturday paper from Australia. If you just tune into the ABC in Australia, you can kind of sometimes feel like the world is ending. But then you have something like the Saturday Paper, which is a weekly. It's a little bit more of a slower pace, and you're maybe able to have a bit more of a considered conversation. So it's that combination of news that I use to help me sort of navigate things.
Okay, let's try to have a considered conversation. Two big topics. Maybe we'll have to come to one after the news. But Gabe, I'll start with you. Obviously, if I go back to this program a week ago, we were trying to, of course, get to grips with everything that had happened on Saturday with the attempted assassination on Donald Trump. And then we've just had this most extraordinary, almost festival in Milwaukee, a leadership convention unlike almost anything we've ever seen. But your take on this, and maybe we could also reflect a little bit, of course, what we're also seeing. We talk about sort of the media as well. I'm not a huge subscriber, and I try to sort of get away from too many alerts. But there it was yesterday afternoon. I thought I'd sort of turned off everything from the New York Times, but somehow this newsletter got through, which was the editorial board of the New York Times. Why in 5 points, we cannot and we must not endorse Donald Trump as the nation's next president. So a lot for you to get through in the next 5 minutes.
Yeah, watching the convention, I was really struck at how much there has been this embrace of professional wrestling as well. And you see a sentence I never thought I would say about politics at conventions as well. But I was thinking of there's this great Roland Barthes essay on wrestling, written decades ago and everything. But he calls it a sum of spectacles, where there's not really a thought of the end result. What are we going to do? And it's more about what can we get everyone excited about in this second, in this moment. And I think that that's a lot of what we saw at the convention. A lot of this flash, a lot of this celebration, people had compared it to a victory party, basically, that the Republicans are thinking, well, yeah, they can just walk away with this election at this point. Democrats, meanwhile, I think this week we're going to see a lot more people come out publicly and say that the Democrats need a change at the top of the ticket. Biden has apparently, come to resent some of the calls to leave, but I think that more and more people are going to be going public. That seems to be the most effective way. We're going to see more lawmakers out here saying we have to make a change. How that's going to work, I'm not sure.
Well, we're in uncharted territory because
exactly,
when someone has dug their heels in that much, is it literally a case that he's going to have to be wheeled out? I mean, of course, he will remain president, right. But of course, when it comes to the leadership ticket, this is going to be fascinating viewing in the coming weeks.
Yeah, and there have been different proposals out there, from going straight to Kamala Harris and making her the nominee. She is vice president after all, second on the ticket already, to some of this talk of, well, maybe we should have a few town halls, that type of thing. I was talking with a delegate recently about, what happens if there is a change, and this delegate had told me, essentially most of them, they're released. They're going to be able to vote the way that they think they need to vote for a candidate. They'll probably get some advice from party leaders. They'll also probably try to do some polling of their own constituency, each delegate going in, to try to figure out how to do this. But I think that's going to be a very difficult situation as it goes in. But the sooner they can do it, the cleaner it's going to be. They have to be campaigning. They have to be trying to motivate these people who are most likely to stay home. They're not going to win over Trump voters. I think everyone who's going to vote for Donald Trump is going to vote, but it's a matter of making sure that anybody comes out to vote for his opponent. And right now, I think a lot of people just aren't that excited.
Priska, were you surprised by any of the scenes that you saw unfolding in Milwaukee this week? Everything from, of course, people wearing sort of sympathy bandages on their ears. When I was out in Zürich yesterday, I thought, was I going to see this on the Bahnhofstrasse as well, like just as a new accessory, maybe with people arriving from Basel, Gabe. Lots of American tour groups out in Zurich doing the tours. But anyway, I didn't see any of that. But yeah, watching it from your perch here in Switzerland across the Atlantic, Priska, any surprises or nothing surprises you anymore?
It's a strange mix of being constantly surprised. I have to be honest, I still think every time I see something like that, I'm like, really? But we are also used to it, of course. it made me think a lot this week. I've thought about the movie Wag the Dog. I don't know if you know Dustin Hoffman and Robert De Niro. And it's a movie about like a war is produced to deflect from a presidential scandal and how it's done and how the media reports and everything. It's from the 90s, but it seemed very current. And I thought maybe this has prepared me to not to be surprised too much.
Exactly. Gabe, when you maybe sort of it's a cynical question, but I was sort of wondering as well, if I'm MSNBC, and of course they're more liberal leaning, as much as if I look at Fox, as much as I look at CNN. In a way, you almost have to be excited, though, if you are a program director, if you are head of a newsroom, that you come into also an exciting time. If there's another, if we sort of shuffle in with another Democratic government, and we have sort of Biden in leadership versus Trump, which you just know what that's going to do for ratings. I mean, yes, there's probably going to be fatigue quite quickly as well, but it makes for more interesting times in the newsroom.
It does, and I always think of that every time I see a headline about Democrats are heading toward a brokered convention or an open convention, because I think that is a political fantasy for so many people, because we haven't had one in most reporters' lifetimes. There hasn't been one in decades. But at the same time, so many journalists came up following that coverage, seeing that coverage as, like the pinnacle of political reporting, of how columnists or how TV broadcasters can really do the job well. So I think there is a bit of a hope there that we might be going into that brokered convention, getting back to maybe an older spirit in journalism or something like that, tip back the fedora with the press card and go into those smoke-filled rooms. So I think there is sometimes the convention talk, I wonder how much of this is really actual political prognosticating, knowing what we know about the party, and how much is someone maybe wanting to live out sort of a journalistic dream that they had only ever read about and are very unlikely to experience.
It is just 10:30 here in Zurich. It's 9:30 back in London. Georgina Godwin is there with the news headlines. Georgina.
Israeli fighter jets struck Houthi military targets near Yemen's Hodeidah port on Saturday, killing at least 3 people and wounding 87 a day after a drone launched by the Iranian-backed group hit Israeli economic hub Tel Aviv, which is more than 1,700 kilometres away. Donald Trump has held his first campaign rally since he narrowly escaped an assassination attempt a week ago, mocking Democrats and comparing former Democratic House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to a dog. North Korea today floated balloons carrying trash towards South Korea, South Korea's military said, declaring it would respond with full-scale loudspeaker broadcasts. And Sanrio, the Japanese entertainment company that created Hello Kitty, made an astounding revelation for the iconic character's 50th anniversary. In an appearance on the Today Show, Sanrio Director of Retail Business Development, Jill Koch, said, Hello Kitty is not a cat. She's actually a little girl born and raised in the suburbs of London. She weighs 3 apples and is 5 apples tall, she said. The revelation sparked a myriad of emotions in fans, ranging from denial to shock and later, confusion. Back to you, Tyler.
Yes, Georgina, a lot of rather stunned faces here in the studio in Zurich as well. I mean, Priska, like raising eyebrows. Are you a Hello Kitty fan?
I was, yes.
Yeah,
very much, yes.
And how do you? It is disturbing, Georgina. Look at you've got again. We go back to those sort of these overinflated words: terror, faces of horror,
yes,
exactly.
Death scenes around this. Georgina, do you sort of put much value in Hello Kitty? Is it sort of within your orbit?
Not particularly, but I can understand the shock and horror of those that trusted in Hello Kitty. If you cannot trust a species to remain faithful to its own genre, what can you do? I mean, it is kind of appalling. Yeah,
and also this is of course. Sanrio is the holder of the brand, and of course they've got many other characters in their stable. And Georgina, of course, you're dealing with publishers and media groups all the time, of course, who have much skin in the game when it comes to IP rights around characters in books, etc. So from your perch, Georgina, do you think that this is a little bit of a move to sort of up sales? Do you think obviously Sanrio is building us up for Hello Kitty is going to have some new partners? What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, it is the 50th anniversary of Hello Kitty, so obviously this is an attempt at a little bit of a refresh. I mean, the piece goes on to say that Hello Kitty has her own kitty and gives it a name, so I wouldn't be at all surprised if Hello Kitty's kitty is the next iteration of this.
Okay, Georgina, stay there because Priska has a story for us as well, which is a little bit to do with sort of holiday reading, etc., and sort of the, I guess maybe a little bit sort of the boom that is going on in sort of pop literature. And Georgina, I'm wondering, from your perspective, again, thinking about the authors that we're bringing on, etc., this whole sort of move into sort of the romantasy, etc. Maybe you're already Nick. Is Georgina rolling her eyes already?
She's rolling her eyes.
She's rolling her eyes. Okay. So yes, people have sort of, they put a new handle and they've applied it to all of this. It creates a whole new sort of section within bookstores. But these books have always been around. I mean, just maybe they've been packaged a little bit differently. Or do you see that there's something else happening there?
No, I mean, they've definitely been around. I mean, I think you can kind of even look back to things like Lord of the Rings. This is not a new genre, but what has changed is TikTok. And so suddenly you've got these young people on TikTok saying, read this. And you've got, I mean, it's really affecting book sales, massively so. And if you want to promote a book these days, you have to get it on TikTok. But the demographic you're then going for is YA or young adult. Good luck to anybody trying to sell a serious literary novel on TikTok. I don't think that the readers of those novels are particularly following the latest young bookstagrammer or influencer.
Priska, your take on this section of the bookshop, or even the train station kiosk, wherever you're finding these things.
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating because it's an industry that invents itself like weekly, it seems. I just read this article about monster smut, it's called. So also partly very sexual content with humans and monsters or different kind of aliens. That's where the science fiction part comes into it. So these books haven't been translated to German, but I've seen them I was recently in London. I've seen some of them, and it's like the genre gets reinvented and they go more into depth because there's so much money in that business. And I think that's fascinating because it's a printed product still,
Exactly.
And as a print lover, but more in magazines and newspapers, I think that's fascinating how new groups of readers are also being built.
And some dedicated stores now to romance novels. There's the Ripped Bodice in
Yes.
I think there's multiple locations now that just selling these romance titles. And the quote I'd heard from one of the people involved was they saw a big peak in sales during the 2016 in the US and global events and everything. Then during COVID, they saw a gigantic peak in sales. And every time there was some sort of, blaring headlines of a crisis, they would see an uptick in sales. And now it's pretty much the same uptick in sales. Like it's no longer peaks, it's just a plateau that they're...
Georgina, any numbers on the uptick in monster smut?
Well, what I would say is that what we're seeing is basically elf pornography. Top elf, if you like.
Okay, good jump in, please, Nick.
Because I just want this, because I am looking this up on my work computer, so I want that flagged that if IT see this on a Sunday morning, it is all research. I would just, not to yuck someone's yum, but I would love to have been in some of these development meetings. I mean, how are you responding when somebody's pitching you something called Stalked by the Kraken, a monster romance, or Smut Peddler presents My Monster Girlfriend? They're meetings I want to be in. I don't know if this is a direction, is there something we can get in our imprint, Tyler?
It could be. I mean, listen, I'm pushing for all kinds of illustrated, whether they're novels, whether they're the Design 100, Nick. That I've been sort of inundating. I think part of the reason why we're opening a Paris office is just the whole power of the bande dessinée in France, and we're missing that. And that's a whole other side as well. Because what I was going to say, Priska, this sort of monster smut world, it actually goes back to. I don't want to bring it back to Hello Kitty, but I think also Hello Kitty is probably, at least in the Japanese market, I'm sure has probably had it off with a few monsters from other publishing companies. But this is also something which I would say has also come from Japan. I mean, if you walk through Shinjuku, Nichome, you look at the windows of all of these porn stores, there's all kinds of illustrated books. People with bears, and I'm talking bears that you'd find in the forest, and all kinds of serpents, and you can just imagine. So I'm also a little bit surprised that this monster smut world, it's taken this long to actually land from Japan as well. But I think it's incredible, as you're saying, though, how these publishing companies reinventing themselves and also sort of spinning the globe constantly, saying what else can we bring into an English language market?
Mm-hmm. And then what I found fascinating. Then after a few months, like every bookstore looks exactly the same now. The trend with the colored pages on the side.
Yes, exactly.
And I can't really differentiate them all. I'm just starting to avoid them, but I think it's fascinating. And as you say, because I read the vampire novels, Twilight and stuff.
Yeah. Of course.
It was fun to read, but never anything else since. And it's taken, 20 or 25 years to expand from vampires to monsters and bears and
But this
whatever.
is the amazing thing. I mean, maybe Gabe, because obviously you're in a city which, of course, has. Yes, Basel is more German, but of course there is definitely French culture in Basel as well. But it is always amazing when you're in Paris, and even when you go down the tracks to Geneva, just if you compare it to being in a bookstore in London or even in Zurich, the amount of illustrated publishing that exists. So just like the amount of French manga, both translated but also homegrown. But then the culture of the bande dessinée. I mean, the world of Tintin and everything else. And again, I mean, just how you have major historical stories now, and that's what I think is kind of amazing when we're trying to get people to sort of course, understand the evolution of democracy. We're trying to get people to vote in the right way, whatever it is, that you have these, because we're in the world of sort of the newsroom explainer, but that you have these incredible volumes which are to explain Gaza, for example. This exists, and it's remarkable to see, but yet it doesn't have the same currency in the English language. We don't really even have that kind of section right now.
No. I wonder if it might start to grow. There is a Swiss publisher, Helvetique, that is doing now a lot of nonfiction illustrated books, a lot of nonfiction graphic novels, particularly aimed at younger readers, at sort of maybe middle school, 12 to 15 or so, and some younger kids as well, but doing a lot of this sort of nonfiction where they're pairing a historian or a researcher with an artist and trying to get those books into the English markets a little bit more and doing some sort of test runs there.
Georgina, just before we switch topics, I just want to understand, when you've been speaking to your publishing friends from the major groups, how's the book fair trading and feeling about the state of the market in summer 2024, when you've been speaking to both authors and, of course, their agents, and perhaps most importantly, in terms of getting books onto shelves, their publishers?
Well, I think what's really interesting is that publishers in America are now not publishing anything major before the elections. So I know a lot of sort of September releases have now been pushed to January or even April next year, which I think is fascinating. They think there will be no room for any kind of book publicity on the front pages, which I think is fascinating. I also just wanted to sort of, I suppose, bring all the strands of the things you've been talking about together, Tyler. You were talking about monsters, obviously sex and being topless, and the US elections and the media.
Okay, here she goes.
And the way things are reported. Well, and we can go back to the Daily Mail here, and particularly the comment you made clarifying what bears are. Apparently, during the Republican Congress, Grindr crashed because it had a 50% uptick in use.
Yeah, well, this doesn't surprise me, and it's going to crash again during the Olympics as well, because we also know that the major sport that of course is not televised, well, maybe it is, and in private channels, of course, is sex, right?
Totally, yeah. Before you just switch, Tyler,
why did they build the Olympic Village in the first place?
I just wanted to just do a quick check-in about this topless thing. How do we feel about it here in the studio?
I do have my top on. Can I just say that quickly?
Okay. That's good.
But maybe I wish you didn't, Nick.
Well, hey, it's Sunday morning. We're about to get spicy. Who knows? The sun's out. Maybe, we are in a more or less bunk here, but maybe that would make it feel a little bit more summery.
Listen, I mean, I think one of the fascinating things that happened in Zurich, Priska, you'll remember this a few years ago. There's always been, of course, a topless side to the body when it's divided. Georgina, I don't know if we've ever been to Utoke around the corner from here, but there's the men's side, and then there's the women's side, and then there's the middle bit for everybody as well. So it can be mixed, and you can be go to the men's side or the women's side, and then they sort of tried to sort of be all inclusive and open the whole thing up, and the city really wanted to say that it's open for all, which in a way it always was open for everybody, and that lasted about 6 hours, I think, because it went back to exactly as it was, because it was one of these things. I go back to also what I was saying in my column today as well, about it was just pragmatic. It was open for everyone, and maybe you don't want to be amongst people of the opposite sex if you have your top off, and I don't know, on the women's side, Priska, I mean, even men have their bottoms off as well over on the men's side as well at Utoke. I'm not sure if you can be fully nude over on going right. No,
not fully nude. I think that's not allowed.
Oh, I think it's alive and well at Utoke.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
at least over the extreme left.
Okay.
It is a pause. Not with amongst many people, but it does happen. So
okay. No, just topless.
Just topless.
But almost everyone is topless on the right side.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's a bit the right side and the left side very non-political. It's really geographically
specific.
Yeah.
Nic, I'll jump in first. I mean, I think, listen, if people want to take their tops off, etc., and I think the other important thing is the lifeguards are very, very good there at telling people to put their phones away.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, they're very, very good at that sort of like the Chicagoan tourist who might walk in and wants to sort of look how beautiful it is here. Meanwhile, sort of zooming in on people either on the left or the right of it. No, that is shut down as well. So Georgina, the poll that you're running, I'm all for it, but I think that there need to be also some guidelines around how these things are documented and recorded. Right. Nic, over to you.
I'm looking at him, but I'm not taking a picture.
I know I'm now topless. It's summer. It's well and truly summer here in London.
Okay, but Nic, you're in favour, clearly. Georgina, what's your view? You brought this up, so
yeah. No, I'm always happy to get them out.
Okay.
An even tan is very important. It is very important.
Gabe?
One thing I'll say, you mentioned the phone thing. There was just the article last month that in Germany that the association of, the free body culture had seen membership drop in almost half over the last 25 years, and events are being canceled. And one thing they say is it's too many tourists with cell phones. It's too many people walking by. They see it. They think it's a laugh. They're going to post on social media. So I think, if you cannot have your photo taken, go for it.
Priska?
I'm more concerned about the development of the fashion of the bikini. That's what I've been looking at this week.
Yeah.
So a much less on the bottom part, much less fabric. So that's
Yeah, and because I mean, some people maybe deserve more fabric and some people don't. I think that's what we're saying. Very quickly, we've got so much to get through in the next 15 minutes before we go. But just we need to talk about Eurovision before we head off to Bangkok. But as I was saying, listeners, Switzerland, of course, won Eurovision and will be hosting in 2025. There's been a big discussion about it since May, what city was going to host it. It was really down to sort of, you would say, the three hubs of the country: Basel, Geneva, Zurich. Zurich has been booted out this week. So it's not just a political thing in terms of that they didn't want to contribute enough money. Switzerland state broadcaster, who of course will be the official host of this, have said, no, it's down between your adopted hometown, Gabe, Geneva, and your adopted Basel, I should say, and now it's down to Geneva, which is also interesting because that's also the home to the European Broadcasting Union as well, which of course is are the fathers, you could say, of Eurovision. So what do we think of this? Just federalism at work?
Yeah, I like it. I would love to see it in Basel. That is the new, like you said, my adopted home. I remember the night of the competition when Nemo was announced as the winner, hearing cheers from the street through the window. I had the window open and it was great. But one thing that had been kind of dismaying for the weeks after, in talking to people of, what if we had it in Basel? And this is, not officials, just friends and neighbors around the city. And the thing everyone said was, oh, but where would we put it? Oh, but wouldn't it be logistically difficult? And now I'm seeing a little bit of a change of tune now. I think there was a bit of resignation of, well, of course it'll go to Zurich, or of course it'll go to Geneva. Now that Zurich's out, I'm seeing a little bit of hopefulness around my neighborhood.
Okay, your take on this? I mean, to me, I think it's, again, should have been pragmatism at work. It should have been in Zurich. It's also the home of the biggest broadcast facilities for the network, etc. But anyway, they have to maybe make the rest of the country feel included.
Yes, that's always the topic. I mean, that it's really true. We always have to discuss les romans aren't felt left out. Always a lot of competition between Bern as the capital, Basel as a very important place for arts and pharma. So,
Yeah. Let's see. We will.
I mean, I can say this because my father was from Basel. Basel is so close to Zurich; it can almost be considered.
Yes, each one considers a suburb of the other, right? Yeah, and this is the other thing. I mean, if you look in the context of many other places, it's very different than saying Liverpool versus London. Yeah. When they were hosting it, you can get to Basel much quicker than you can probably get from the center of London. I don't know, to Deptford or somewhere else. So.
Oh yes, I was here from my apartment in maybe an hour 15 minutes on the tram and the train, and I know people who are commuting between the two cities.
Yes, so maybe cynically as well, sort of Zurich sort of also feels that yes, they will be reaping the benefits because they're not. We see there aren't enough hotel rooms anyway. So. Yeah. I don't know if they'll do like Art Basel and put the hotels on the barges on the river. It's just coming up to 10:49. We've got two other guests to chat to. Let's head to Bangkok right now. James Chambers, our Asia editor, is standing by. James, you teased us at the top of the program. Again, monster theme or sort of cuddly cookie monsters. Do we want to start there and what the story is in Thailand?
Yeah, morning, Tyler. Yes, it would make sense to start there, and I'm glad I'm coming to you with a mascot story and not something about the third plenum in China, because after Monster Smut, I think that would be a bit too serious. But this is a story about Butterbear, who has become the new sensation in Thailand. He's a homegrown mascot for a cookie shop that's at that M-Sphere, that new M-Sphere mall in Bangkok. And loads of tourists, particularly Chinese tourists, have been lining up at 4 a.m. in the morning just to get photos of this mascot when he does his little dance. And it's been such a success that the Thai Tourism Authority has essentially signed him up or promoted him to national mascot. And he's now going to be going on tour to try and lure more Chinese tourists to Bangkok.
James, just can you describe Butterbear to our listeners, because not maybe everyone are sort of reaching for the phone right away to see what he looks like.
Yeah, I think you could think about the old bear that you find in the closet or in the attic that once belonged to your mother or grandmother. That's a bit like what Butterbear looks like. He's very old-fashioned, cuddly, cute, yes, but he looks like a bear, definitely from last century. So it's not a modern take.
Okay, so not a bear that had a late night in Patpong.
Certainly not. I must admit I haven't been there at 4 a.m. To queue to see his dances yet. But when I do, I will report back.
Yeah, I mean, there are sort of shades of. He's more. Yeah, he's just more sort of bear-like than Paddington. If sort of Paddington's maybe a bit more human somehow. This is very, very much a cartoon. Our studio manager, Linus, is holding up an image, so we sort of get the full view of the bear in question. James, let's go staying on people in outfits and costumes. Quite a story this week when it comes to uniforms and maybe sort of national dress. We had the Prime Minister coming out defending the opening ceremony uniforms that will be worn by the Thai national team in Paris come Friday evening. What's all the fuss been about?
Yeah, I mean, before the Olympics start, it'll be the case across the world that every country, every team, reveals the outfits that their athletes are going to wear. It probably is the same in Switzerland. And I remember when it was, in the UK before London 2012, when Stella McCartney revealed her ones. those got a very good reception, but when the Thais revealed theirs a few days ago, the reaction from the public was very, very negative. If you look at all of the comments, especially online, these outfits have been slated across the board. Just to describe what they're trying to achieve, they've gone for the kind of Thai heritage and Thai culture. So it's a very traditional, very formal wear. It's in indigo. It's got some patterns related to some very, very historic heritage site. But the problem is they've kind of forgotten about the probably the more important elements, which is kind of fashion and design. And they've been compared to hotel bellboys from last century. And it makes me think about that comment you made about the Olympic Village. One of the funniest comments I saw about these uniforms was that if the Thai athletes are actually seen in the Olympic Village walking around with these, then they won't need those free condoms.
I mean, okay, that's even more extreme. I thought they're just going to ask someone from another country to carry their bags. James, just staying in your region, though, and Priska brought up a story about all the attention the Mongolians have received, and it's quite something. It's amazing, this soft power assault that you could say that Mongolia is launching, and the uniforms, Priska, are really quite remarkable. And also going back a little bit to sort of, Game of Thrones. I mean, they're slightly medieval. I mean, you sort of expect archers on horseback, but also in a very modern context as well.
Yes, I think they just did maybe what the Thais didn't. It's very fresh and modern, but very traditionalist too. It feels truly like high fashion, and it also was received very well this week. So that's nice. And
Switzerland as well, maybe on the other tech side, and it'll be a sort of an on-running show as well. I guess they're doing the official walk-on uniform and also performance uniform for sort of many of the athletes.
Yes, for the Swiss Olympic team, and they also released a new shoe this week, which got a lot of media coverage because it's a spray-on shoe. It was developed very quickly in the last 4 years, and the technique is like a guy I saw at Halloween. He saw someone using a spray can to form like a spider net with some kind of foam. And
if it was just Zürich, they'd just be spraying a building, because that's also that could also be an Olympic sport here. But that's another topic.
That is another topic. Yes, so that he saw that someone did that and developed a spray-on shoe that maybe will also be the solution of production for sports shoes. We will see. It's a very interesting story in NZZ am Sonntag and also Tagesanzeiger this week. And it's produced by a robot called Daisy. And it's based here in Zurich. And they produced the uniforms for the Swiss Olympic team. It's not my favorite one. I like the Mongolian one. I also like the Canadian one by Lululemon. That's very colorful.
Well, we'll probably have a full assessment on this as well, because we'll be, of course, coming from the Olympics next week. We're going to be broadcasting for the next 2 weeks from Paris from this Friday. In fact, James, just quickly before we go. Do you think it's a little bit of traditionalism is actually okay when it comes to uniforms, or are you're not voting for this Thai uniform?
Well, there's some of the public have produced their own uniforms which marry kind of tradition and modernity, and they're much, much better. But I do think it's a kind of lesson for Mr. Biden in the US. Sometimes, it's right to be stubborn, and sometimes you've got to listen to people. And actually, the Thais have listened, and they've decided to make a change. So they've dumped those horrible uniforms, those bellboy uniforms, and they're just going with the tracksuits. The tracksuits aren't that great either, but they're definitely they're way better than they were. So if Mr. Biden's listening, I'd say, it is sometimes the best to listen to what people are saying around you.
James Chambers in Bangkok, thanks very much for that. We're coming to the end of the show very quickly. I'm not sure if we have time to get to Paris to talk to Hani Behlacene from Bonjour Jacob, but hopefully he is standing by. But just very quickly, what are you reading for summer? Just very, very, very quickly, Gabe.
Oh, yeah. New book, Laura Pawson, Spent Light. It is a more experimental bridge between essay and autofiction from a longtime correspondent. Read a very good review of it in the Times Literary Supplement, so looking forward to diving into that fairly soon. And
just very quickly, you've sort of moved off the smut bus, I guess. You're reading things that are hopefully...
I haven't gone into it in the first place, yes.
Okay.
I'm reading the book that everyone reads around me, Miranda July's On All Fours.
Okay. Very quickly, Hani Behlacene from Bonjour Jacob is in Paris for us this morning. Hani, we have about 90 seconds, not even. Just quickly, tell us, and bonjour, ça va?
Hi, morning, Taylor.
Just tell us very quickly, the top three things. If we went into Bonjour Jacob up near Canal Saint-Martin, what are people buying this summer? What are they reading?
Yeah, actually, it's Olympics games that you should get. Atletica is a biannual fashion sport magazine. You can find a portrait of men and women about sport and about fashion. This is the first one. The second one is like published by brands, a magazine published by brands. And for this, I have two selections. The first one is from On Running, the brand of shoes. It's Off magazine, and which focus in creator, artist, sportive, and new direction is very interesting magazine. And the last one is printed by Karat. It's like a new movement in for all the brand, and we can get a new media. And with Karat magazine, you can get a lot of information about the focus about the new musical scene and image and talent. This is the three books that I suggest today.
Hani, and just very quickly for our listeners who are going to be heading to Paris for the Olympics, are you going to be open during this period, or are you going to be closing like everyone else?
We are open all days.
Excellent. Hani, I look forward to seeing you in Paris, maybe even tomorrow. And of course, later, all of Monocle is going to be, not all of Monocle, but I think there's going to be a good 12 people descending on Paris from later in the week. Gabe, huge thanks for being here today. Lovely seeing you. Priska, great seeing you as well. Also, thanks to our James Chambers, of course, back in Bangkok for us. Georgina Godwin, of course, looking after things for us. And also Lena Svivian here. And Steph Chungu, looking after all of the audio and production for us in London. I'm Tyler Brûlé. Hopefully we'll chat to you from Paris next weekend. Goodbye.